Today is special. I want to make my attempt at resolving the 250-year-old mystery in economics. It's the mystery about what the invisible hand actually is. Now, I believe that this mystery can be resolved, but we have to look at economics in a new way. Economics is a social science, and we have to look at it like it's a science. Let's take the bioscience. We have, in the mid-1600s, Newton discovered the mathematics for the laws of motion. Newton discovered physics, the math, for the laws of gravity. He creates calculus. He then finds the math for optics and color. It wasn't for 200 more years when a man by the name of Albert Einstein and his really smart friends invented quantum mechanics, or the laws of physics, the math of the very small things. But we have two sets of physical laws discussing basically the same thing. And I think that's exactly what we have in economics. I think we have to look at both macroeconomic laws, and I think they will help us discover what the invisible hand is. The division of labor. Now, Adam Smith knew all about the division of labor. He resisted in the Industrial Revolution, and he realized how important the division of labor was in creating efficiency in the factory, and that it just cut costs and made products available to the masses. But he had a problem with the division of labor. He worried because he thought that it would make work so boring and so monotonous that he questioned the division of labor just for that reason alone. So I don't believe that was his invisible hand. What about the laws of supply and demand? Adam Smith was well aware of the laws of supply and how supply and demand determined pricing. You have Say's law, which is supply creates demand. And you have Keynes saying, nonsense, demand creates supply. And I say that both are right. They're one process. So supply and demand is clearly not the invisible hand. What about the law of comparative advantage? That's Ricardo. That's in years after Adam. That's like the first generation of economists, classical economists after Adam. And that's the rule that controls our international trade. How one country does what it does best, the other country does what it does best, and they trade, and everyone is richer. This is clearly not the invisible hand because he wasn't invented. That idea wasn't invented until after Adam Smith. Now, the most common macroeconomic idea that people use this metaphor is that free markets competition is what the invisible hand is. And I say to them, I have two reasons why I don't think that that is accurate. I believe that free markets are a conservative economist's utopian delusion. There were never free markets during the time of Adam Smith. And there was trade, of course, the West India, the East India Company. No free markets there. And there's no free markets today. We have capture economics. We have a lot going on. What we always had is a mixed both in the days of Adam Smith and today. So what I'd like to say about macroeconomics, these principles are so important. But what they really do is to create an environment for the capitalism and for the invisible hand. These macroeconomic principles, laws, are the ocean that capitalism swims in. So extremely important, but they are not the invisible hand. When I was going to business school in 1978 to 82, microeconomics was considered economics of the firm, like the individual business. It was taught with the use of graphs and lines and curves. It was entirely mathematical. Today, 40 years later, microeconomics is something very different. There are 340 million Americans in the United States. That is 340 million individual economies. This is the world of behavioral finance, like choice theory and cognitive biases. That's how the individual makes consumer decisions. At another level, and this is really the level because I come out of personal finance, there are 121 million households in the United States of America. In other words, 340 million people in 121 million households. So about 3.5 per people per household. Now, if we have to look back at classical microeconomics, it's the firm. There are 33,100,000 small businesses in the United States. Farms, doctor's offices, that's software companies, that's everything. This is the power of our economy. This is the consumer, and whatever gig you're in, you're part of that. 43,100,000 small businesses. Adam Smith came out of the Scottish Enlightenment. He was taught by people like Francis Hutchinson, like John Locke, like Burke, like Hume. And if I had to describe the Scottish Enlightenment in one sentence, I would say that's all life is experiential. But I believe the invisible hand is the very real human ability to imagine. It's the very human trait of empathy, the ability to enter into another person's mind and understand their desires, understand what they want, understand their suffering, understand their pain, understand their passions. You have the ability magically to do this. It is in my self-interest to provide goods and services for others that benefit others. It is entirely altruistic. It is the foundation of any business transaction that's occurred between caveman till today is we're providing goods and services for others. Adam Smith didn't invent morals, but in his theory for moral sentiments, in his lectures, he discussed sentiments, sympathy, and empathy in great detail. He spent his whole life. I believe that is what he meant by the invisible hand. In other words, the invisible hand has been hiding in plain sight. The invisible hand is each and every one of us, using our imagination, our creativity to provide goods and services for others. I have a quote from Ludwig von Mises, who was founder of the Austrian school. He was able to sort of put in words better than I could for certain how empathy and capitalism intersect. And here it is. It is not the fault of the entrepreneurs that the consumers, the people, the common man, prefer liquor to Bible and detective stories to serious books, and the governments prefer guns to butter. The entrepreneur does not make greater profits from selling bad than he does from selling good. His profits are the greater, the better he succeeds in providing consumers with those things that they want most intensely. The empathy of the entrepreneur. Thank you for listening to me for so long. And my rant, I do appreciate your time.